I thought about doing just like a 5-10 second bit. You know, hey, this game sucks. Ka-conk. Cut to credits, you know. But no. It is, as I said on stream, I take my job seriously. I know a lot of people don't think I do. A lot of random YouTube commenters tend to think that I just do this all willy-nilly, but I actually do care a lot about doing as good of a job as I am capable of doing within the limitations put upon me. And that means I have to actually explain to you why this game sucks. That's your bombshell. This game sucks. Don't play it. Don't pick it up. Don't buy it. Garbage. It's a shame. The idea of a game following Sulu, or Sulu and Chekhov, actually sounds kind of awesome to me. But instead we got this. So, where do I even begin? It was a PS2 game by a studio that fell apart and then had to be picked up by another studio. It was also the last game that studio ever made. This is shovelware, but I'm going to go and define that a little bit, because we have had two definitions of shovelware, well, actually three, over the course of video gaming history. There's the one way back in the Atari crash days. There's the one that exists now, but the one in the middle is the one that concerns me. It's license crap. So there was this thing that was very common for quite a while. We've kind of started drifting out of it, actually, thank God. But the idea was you go ahead and you buy a license for, RoboCop or, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or whatever, and you put you hire a really cheap or really crap, and therefore cheap, company to go ahead and push out a crap game based on that to try and get people to buy it. And it's important to keep the costs down, because the whole point is to just turn a quick buck. Hence the shovel concept is why they used it in this concept. So you churn out a crap game from a company that probably doesn't know what they're doing because of the license took up all the extra money, and there's a reason why licensed games have had a bad rep for so long. Now, there's always been exceptions, of course. Even back in the NES era, there were still exceptions and licensed games that were actually worth the damn. But that's where the term came from, and that's where the stigma came from, and this game is shovelware crap. But let's get into some of the specifics of why. So, right off the bat, you have this mission where you have to go race through, and you're like, okay, you're in this big empty space. Now, I know this sounds like a strange complaint, but I've actually played quite a few Starfighter games. In fact, I've played, I think, all of them, technically, to some extent or another, because it's a genre I love and find very near and dear to my heart, and is, in my opinion, very, very lacking in good games. In fact, there's probably like 5 total ever across all of history, which sucks. So, I'm into this, right? TIE Fighter, you got that. Freelancer, we got that, you get it. Elite, yep. Mm-hmm. So I'm going through this like, okay, cool. And there's things you can do. You can add environmental effects. You can add certain types of navigation. You could add ships that have different maneuvering strategies, or maybe they have different placements, or maybe they have different shieldings. Or there's things you can do to make it more than just a giant empty space that happens to have some targets in it. They did not do that in this game. With one exception we'll get to in a minute. So instead, you go to a spot, and you blow something up, and then you have a very loud sound effect, and then some enemy fighters spawn in and fight you. No danger, it's just a waste of time and it's boring. Then you go to a spot, and then you repeat this like 7 times. It's dull as dishwater, and probably one of the better missions in the game. Shortly after this, we have to do a bunch of fighters, but then this is beautiful the way this. I'm going to just address the gameplay and the story kind of side by side. Is that okay? Do this a little bit different than usual. Let's rewind a second then. Let's talk about core gameplay, not actually individual missions. So it's a fighter game, right? PS2, stick, woo, cool. That's cool. So you can't go zero. You cannot stop. You can only go reverse or go faster. So that's already kind of disorienting in a game like this, especially in circumstances where you want to be going a specific speed, and the only 3 speeds you have are reverse, normal, and faster. So that sucks. But then we add into the fact that even though there is a variety to the type of weapons you have, for the most part, those weapons are almost identical to each other. You've got beam weapons, which just kind of do hit scan damage, which is really weird to think about. Then you've got your shots, which are kind of crap unless you can actually get the shots to hit. You've got your torpedoes. You've got homing torpedoes, which do very little damage. You've also got the big torpedo, which does a lot of damage, but is really hard to hit something because it's slow. I think that's everything. I think that's all the weapons you have access to. There's a cloak you can get, but I mean, there's absolutely no reason whatsoever to cloak in this game, for reasons I'll get to in just a moment. That's your lot. You can get better ships which have better stats, but they have the same basic weapons. That's it. So that's your kit. That's your variety. It's garbage. Then we add into that the fact that the brickwork of this game is actively bad. I guess in this case it's more like the skybox. One of the things I made fun of early on was the blue crap. Later on it became the green crap, and later on it became the yellow crap. There's this filter. They just put an animated image over the screen, and it's just this filter that just adds this visual effect to make it look like you're in a nebula. It looks like crap. But in addition to that, you've also got your HUD, when we're speaking of visual elements, and the HUD is not very well understandable, a problem endemic of a lot of games in this era, actually. But more to the point, it's never explained. I figured out what the HUD elements were just by playing the game and hoping for the best and, watching and paying attention. But the HUD also has critical elements which are covered by text boxes. So anytime anyone says anything, a text box shows up and literally covers half the HUD. Did I mention this game has an audio spam problem? Especially on the M5 mission, is probably the worst about this. But in every mission, you'll always hear, new enemy fighters are showing up. The hull is at 25%. The shields are down 25%. New enemies are fighting. There's new enemies in your sector. Go kill the rest of the enemies. Blah, 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 blah. Like, they just spam. And all of those have a text pop-up, which blocks half your HUD. But I was talking about skyboxes. I want you to imagine the most boring space skyboxes you can think of. And there you go. That's that. Okay, so that's cool. That sucks. We mentioned audio spam. Did I mention... So, I'm actually pretty into this genre of game, as I mentioned earlier. One of the things that makes this critically important is being able to manage your speed. Now, I've kind of already addressed that, but hang on, it gets worse. All the enemy fighters, yes, all of them, are faster than you. They're just straight up faster than you. If you are gunning it, aka holding down R2, they will outpace you. Now, that sucks for several reasons, but it essentially means that as the enemy fighters don't really know how to deal with you, still building up to that point, it means you're going to be chasing them around a lot, or shooting at them while they're completely ignoring you. If they actually notice you or are part of their thing, you're actually trying to get them in time. And if they're ahead of you and going towards, the Excelsior, you can't really catch them. They will get their hits off. Keep that in mind, too. Then there's the capital ships, which... So very early on, I believe it was mission 3, I think? Something like that. There's a mission where an enemy capital ship shows up. It's not a big ship. It's just a, dinky little hull, but whatever. It shows up right next to the Excelsior. So I'm like, okay. So what I do is I start shooting all the fighters down. I start doing my job as a fighter. I take out the enemy screen so the Excelsior can take down that ship. After all, the Excelsior just got repaired, right? The Excelsior-class Dreadnought gets absolutely shreked. It was at this moment I realized the game expected me to take on the capital ships. And then, not very many missions from now, in fact, did I write down the number? Mission 4, very next mission. I have to take out 4 Constitution-class cruisers at the same time, by myself. Now, this is drifting a little bit into the narrative side of things, but this is stupid on every level. This would work kind of in a Star Fox game, because the whole point of the R-Wings is that they are very overpowered, very expensive, very highly customized craft for the main characters, flown by some of the biggest badasses in the setting. But for me, Tuvok, because I'm totally playing Tuvok in this game, flying around, having just tried my botanist career and just jumped into a fighter I've never even seen before we jumped into the Mirror Universe, and going around and blowing up capital ships all willy-nilly, and I took out a lot of capital ships in this game. This is ridiculous. It's even more so because the capital ships themselves are kind of pathetic. So there's a good idea here. What they do is they make each capital ship have, there's a gun here, and a gun here, and a gun here. So they've got obvious blind spots, right? So you just get in a blind spot and shoot them. The thing is, while that's a neat idea, it's not fleshed out at all because I just told you the entire idea. The strategy for every single capital ship is get in the blind spot and sit there holding down the fire button. It's exactly as boring as it sounds. The only thing that spices it up is occasionally, and not always, the enemy fighters will notice that you're doing that and come after you, and that's about as much excitement as that gets. Also, you shred through capital ships. We're talking taking down, cruisers in probably about 30 seconds total. Not that I want it to take longer, but you can see how this kind of makes me go, what? Okay. But I've been building up to a point, because I've just given you all the information you need to know to understand why this game really sucks. So, we're launching from the Excelsior. The Mirror Excelsior, because that makes absolutely no sense, that we suddenly are jumped into the Mirror Excelsior with the Mirror Sulu. Except it's not the Mirror Sulu. It's our Sulu in the Mirror Sulu's body and uniform, along with the rest of the crew who are in the Mirror uniforms, even though they're in the Mirror bodies, even though they're the core. Try to picture the fact that just the brain, or even just the consciousness, which is even weirder, just gets warped between the two. Yeah, I know, there's weirder things in Trek. It's just... This premise is terrible. But anyway, so we get warped into the Mirror ship. Okay, fine. We're beamed over. Whatever. The next thing that happens is we get out, fly around, and do this thing, and we have to keep the escort cool, right? We have to keep the Excelsior cool, because the whole game, the entire game is an escort mission. There is one level in the entire game that is not centered around keeping the Excelsior alive. Now, this sucks on every level. Most people don't like escort quests for good reason. I myself have detailed in several previous games and several discussions why escort quests tend to suck. There's a lot of reasons. I'm not going to enumerate them right now. You could probably list on them without even thinking about it. But it didn't occur to me until the end of the game why the entire game is an escort mission. The AI is stupid. I don't mean that as an insult, I mean that as a statement of fact. The AI does not know how to track or fight you, the fighter. Moving targets confuse them. The AI also is not programmed to acknowledge collision and will frequently bounce into things over and over and over while trying to get to a location. And will never stop. It'll just keep going bunk, 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 bunk. I saw this happen several times in several missions. So the AI can't negotiate, it can't maneuver, and it can't hunt down a solitary target, like a moving target. And you see the problem from the developer's perspective, because they don't, apparently, know how to code this. Which means all of a sudden the game is piss easy. Because the enemy ships will never be a threat to you. The capital ships can't hit you in the blind spots, and the fighters can't find you or fight you. So what do? They give you the Excelsior, which is a static ship with large blind spots. And hey, guess what the enemy fighters can actually hit? Thus, the Excelsior literally becomes our health bar. This is an interesting solution, but as you might imagine, it's terrible. Because there's another problem here, too. See, the Excelsior doesn't have any easier of a time hitting those fighters than the capital ships have hitting us. But on top of that, we also have another problem wherein the ally fighters are just as useless. The ally fighters can do some damage to the enemy capital ships, but that's it. And they don't always do that. In fact, most of the time, ally fighters focus on enemy fighters, and enemy fighters always focus on the Excelsior. Usually also there's multiple enemy capital ships, whereas we have one. So we have a nice big open weak point target over there. And by the way, the Excelsior is made of paper mache. The reason I made that joke earlier is because one of the things I heard most often in this game was shields down to 25%. At one point in time, we did a guessing game. I asked the people in chat to guess how long it would take to go from 50% to 25% heat shields. The answer was 20 seconds. We counted. Lord Harrowmont won. So, you have a giant, glaring, glowing weak spot that you cannot defend properly, that the enemy will absolutely mulch, while defeating enemies that are not interesting to fight. This is simultaneously very hard, very easy, and very boring. And that's core gameplay. So, we have the intro cinematic. And the moment I watched the intro cinematic, I realized what I was in for. One of the things I talk a lot about in cinematic design is everything. I've actually talked about this recently because, the camera, lighting, blocking, storytelling, writing, voice acting, all the things that make a cutscene. The intro cinematic sucked. It was, I wrote it down. I actually have my notes right here. Storyboarding, pacing, writing, directing, and also voice acting was all bad. And I saw that like, oh, that's not good. Also animation, while we're on the subject. We've got these weird clay figurines. I remind you, this game came out in 2004. Now, you might think, oh, it's so long ago. But please keep in mind that games that came out prior to this include Final Fantasy X And this was the year that Grand Theft Auto San Andreas came out. We also had Half-Life 2 came out this year. And I could go down those. I could come up with a lot. You get the idea. So, no. But anyways, so they warp over. That's cool. Then they go to the Starbase. Now, the Starbase is repairing the Excelsior. And then they continue repairing the Excelsior, despite the fact that they've decided to destroy the Excelsior. I'm not making this up. So then they're like, okay, cool. Then the clamps in the repair bay, which is repairing them, clamp down, and you suddenly have a timer pop up. This game loves timers. Anytime a timer runs out, it's game over unless you do the thing within the time. Some of these are generous. Most of these are about a minute. Sometimes they're 90 seconds. Sometimes they're 14 seconds. That's not a joke either. So if the clamp doesn't go away, then you beat the enemy capital ship. I already mentioned that. Okay, cool. That's cool. Then we have to go beat the M5 by taking out 4 Constitutions in a row at the same time. Then the Orions show up. Then Sulu decides to not have a brain about trying to interact with Chekhov and try to get him to work with him, even though he does that later in the game. Then there's the fact that the game feels like a random smorgasbord of TOS references, because it is. But also, like, there's no pacing, there's no storyboarding, there's no story sequencing. It's just this happens, this happens, this happens, this happens, this happens, this happens. And it's just, there's no tempo to it at all. Then, God. Then we hit Mission 6. You remember when I mentioned earlier there's a mission where we go hit minerals and then fight enemies and then hit minerals? Mission 6 is that mission again. Just same damn thing. That's it. Then we have to fight Balok from the First Federation. This is great, because what ends up happening is he shows up and he swarms us with 50 hyperbolillion ships. I'm barely joking. Anybody who watched the stream can attest to this. I was killing an average of one of these ships every 2 to 3 seconds. I was chipper shredding through these things. I'm actually good at these kind of games. And despite the terrible controls. And I was just... And I still... The Excelsior's shields were gone, and the hull was down to here. I'm pretty sure it was actually at 1 or 2% HP. Barely managed that mission, despite doing as best as I possibly could to get through it. And you start to see the whole Excelsior problem with the entire game. And then we move forward, and we've got a couple other missions. There's the Amoeba mission, which is boring and stupid. It involved shooting things in a line for about 10 minutes. And then we've got the Tholian defense mission, which had its frustrations, the Vortex mission, which is extremely boring, and then the outro mission, which is terrible, because the outro mission is literally the most boring mission design I could think of. Here's the Excelsior. Here's the enemy Excelsior. You ignore that ship. And here's tons of ships. I think I killed like 64 fighters in the attempt where I failed. And it's just stand there for 10 minutes. It is literally a 10-minute timer to win the mission. All you have to do is run out the timer and have the Excelsior not explode in 10 minutes. I failed. Because because of everything I already talked about. But you probably think, well, what's going on narratively? Well, like I said, it kind of bounces around a bit, but we end up saving the Klingons from the planet killer device, the Doomsday device from the episode The Doomsday Machine. Okay, so that's cool. And we end up blowing that thing up. I swore I thought they were going to make us do it in the fighter. But no, we end up doing it with the Klingon ship. So the Klingons are like, we're your allies. And then randomly we go to help the Romulans out because they've got the amoeba, the space amoeba, the star system size space. It's okay, we already know how to kill that thing, so we help them out. And so the Romulans and the Klingons are now our allies and everything's cool. And then we end up helping out Chekhov, who's been following us this whole time. And there's this wonderful, wonderful scene where Chekhov is talking to the high command of the Terran Empire. And they say, do what you must, Starfleet out. Not making that up. So anyways, then Chekhov gets sent on a suicide mission to the Tholians. We end up rescuing him. Chekhov is on our side. We go do a big battle, which is just boring and dumb, and then we go into the vortex, and it turns out that alternate Sulu, Mir Sulu, who I remind you is in our body, and our Excelsior is all pissed off because his entire crew is dead. So he is going to kill you because he has managed to run around in the Prime timeline and convince the Romulans and the Klingons to join together under him to unite against the Federation, which probably sounds familiar. But, so then he launches the 50 Hyperborean ships at us that he has with his crew that's dead. I'm guessing they're all just piloted by bots. That would explain a lot. Although I'm curious how he can fit that many ships inside the Excelsior, especially since the very concept of fighter craft was something that was supposed to be introduced in the Terran Empire. Like, we get there, it's like, oh my god, we found these weird ships instead of shuttles. Let's go ahead and use those. I'm not going to get into the topic of how fighters don't even really make sense within Star Trek's pre-existing technology base. Let's not even get into that. And then we win, and we go back to the Prime Universe, and it turns out that, oh my god, and Sula just says, nah, been there, done that. Wah, wah, credits. I wanted to really go through that. I know that was mostly just me discussing what was happening, but I feel like that's the best way for anybody who didn't watch the stream to really understand how atrociously bad this game is. This game is garbage. It was kind of reaffirming, though. I'm going to say this right at the end for the like 5% of you who actually watch a video to the end of the video, because I was able to be entertaining the whole time. I got a lot of positive comments and a lot of positive feedback about the stream. Like, I had people message me in private saying, hey, this is great. This is very entertaining. You do a good job, blah, blah, blah. And I had, of course, people saying that in chat. And that's just kind of nice to know that I can do my job while playing a game like this. So, thanks. I hope you have enjoyed. I'll see you next time. Oh, I should do this one for this. Oh. I didn't even mention the wormhole.